When you think about the difference between how most players fight and how the pros fight, what do you think of? Is it speed? Is it edit selection? Is it conserving mats? Well, yes, it's probably all those things. But it's also peaking properly. There are pros that aren't that fast or that don't choose the best edit or spin way too many mats. But there aren't pros that just peak badly. Because when you're playing against other good players, you just can't get away with that. At a certain level, if you move into your peaks poorly, you're going to get shot for it. Even if you're fast enough to get some build pieces on them, they'll have their weapon out and will punish you for using a peak wrong. So then how exactly do you use each peak? Well, it depends on which kind of peak you're making. There are only 5 different categories of peaks and everything falls into one or more of these categories. Let's start with right side peaks since they're the easiest to understand. Right side or right hand peaks allow you to shoot the enemy first if you're looking around the right side of something, because the third person camera is always on the right side of your character and weapons are held on the right side of your character. To properly use right side peaks, just move to the right around the obstacle. However, an extremely common mistake with this peak is staying as close to the wall as possible. When you're super close to a wall, a red X pops up showing you that your shot won't hit the opponent. This happens because even though your camera has line of sight with the enemy, your weapon does not. Your weapon has to have line of sight with the opponent for you to be able to shoot them. And since your camera is more to the right than your weapon, sometimes you'll be able to see them but not shoot them. The simple way to fix this is by just backing up just a tad. You don't have to back up far at all, just being a half step back from the wall will make your peak much stronger, so now you can actually shoot them first. So then if people are right hand peeking wrong, why does it work? Well, that's because they're using the second category of peaks. This second category is ping peaks, also known as peeker's advantage. Basically, because of the delay caused by ping, nobody ever sees where you are according to your screen. They only ever see an after image of where you used to be. This makes it so that the person who is moving into a peak always has the advantage over someone who's standing still or moving away from a peak. The faster you move into a peak, the more of an advantage you'll get. The best example of a peak in this category is a falling peak. The fastest way to move is by falling, so if you jump down from a couple stories up, you fall so fast that you can shoot the opponent and block the return shot before you're even visible on their screen. Peeker's advantage is most obvious with these peaks since you can fall multiple times faster than you can run, but this is still a factor in every peak just to a lesser extent. So looking back at right side peaks, when someone is right up against the wall and moves into a right side peak, it doesn't work out because they're making the right side peak correctly, it's working because they're using Peeker's advantage correctly. But you should be doing both, moving as fast as possible into the peak while not being right up against the wall. So with any right side peaks, whether it be around a wall, around a half ramp, or into a window, you should stay a little bit back and move as fast as possible to the right before shooting and then resetting the build. The third category of peaks, which is the strongest, is bottom side peaks. Bottom side peaks are any peaks where the top half of the enemy's body is blocked off, more commonly known as
I want him tall, give him tall, boy!
I'll spare you the explanation on why it's so strong since it's in my last video, but it works as long as you're further away from the wall than your opponent. In order to use these peaks properly, you just want to move backwards as fast as possible. In the same way that with right side peaks you want to move to the right as fast as possible, with bottom side peaks you want to move backwards as fast as possible. Because if the opponent is able to back up to almost the same distance as you, they'll be able to shoot you back. The most common time you'll find these edits is when the ground is uneven or with bottom triangle edits. But there's another deceptive one that's also a bottom side peak, the 4-tile jumping edit. There's no wall edit that just cuts off the bottom half of the wall, but the next closest thing is this topmost part of the 4-tile edit. So if you jump before you make this edit, you've created a bottom side peak. Plus, when you jump, your character tucks in their legs so they don't stick out as much as an enemy standing up would. This peak specifically is different from most others. To do it correctly, you want to jump, then right before you reach the apex of your jump, open the edit. By the time you start descending into the peak, your shotgun will be ready to shoot. So then as soon as you can hit their lower body, shoot and reset. You have the benefits of a bottom side peak, plus you tuck in your legs, plus you're falling into the peak, giving you Peeker's advantage. You can also jump and fall into windows and use the top edge of the window the same way, but because windows are so small, it can be difficult to line it up properly if the opponent doesn't move how you expect. But regardless of which bottom side edit you're making, you need to know that you shouldn't be trying to hit center mass. Your goal is to shoot their legs and feet. If you're able to see their chest, they can probably already see your feet. And it doesn't matter whether you shoot their chest or feet, it does the same amount of damage. You might think more pellets will hit if you aim center mass, but the leg hitboxes are way wider than they look. You can try and shoot directly between their legs and all the pellets will still hit. Occasionally 1 or max 2 pellets will slip through, but generally they will all hit regardless of where on their legs you hit. So when you make a bottom side peak, you want to stay further away from the wall than the opponent, move as fast as possible away from the wall, then shoot and reset as soon as you have a full shot on their feet or legs. Now before we look at the last two categories, I need to mention the difference between third person and first person peaks. By default, Fortnite isn't a first person shooter, it's a third person shooter. First person means you play from the point of view of your character. Overwatch, Valorant, Apex, and Call of Duty are all examples of first person shooters. Third person means you play from the point of view of someone watching your character. Fortnite, GTA, The Last of Us, and Red Dead Redemption are all third person shooters. Basically, if you can see your own character, it's third person. If you can't, it's first person. Before, the only time Fortnite would ever go first person mode was when you ADS with a sniper. But then came the MK7, the Red Eye, and all the other first person weapons. Now you can put a first person scope on any weapon you want. So then when should you use a scope over iron sights? Literally always. In every single situation, having a scope is better than not having it. Which one you pick is preference for sure, but having a scope attachment actually gives you better peeking angles than with iron sights, both in long range engagements and close up. In long range situations, when peeking around the right side of a wall or a window with a scope attachment, you don't have to expose yourself nearly as much as you do with iron sights. And when peeking over the top of a build, it's the same. You don't have to peek nearly as much to be able to shoot enemies. In box-to-box engagements, the same is true. When you're aiming a shotgun without a scope attachment, you have to move more to the right to be able to shoot your opponent than if you had been ADS'd with a scope attachment. And if you think your scope is useless in box fights because it takes too long to ADS, then you must have missed this video, because you don't actually have to wait until your weapon is out to ADS. There's a trick that lets you ADS during the pullout animation of any weapon so that by the time the weapon is ready to fire, you're already fully aimed in. You should do it with all weapons, but especially shotguns and snipers. I'll leave a link to that video at the end of this one in case you haven't seen it already. So long story short, always take a scope on your weapon given the opportunity. But back to the other categories of peaks. Topside peaks are just the inverse of the bottom side peaks. Your camera doesn't actually pivot around the very top of your head, but lower around your mouth. So if you make a peak that only exposes the top of their head, you can shoot them without them being able to shoot you. Just like with bottom side peaks, you have to be further away from the wall than your opponent and shoot as soon as you have a full shot on them. But topside peaks are much more dangerous because there's only a very small area between where you can hit them and where they can hit you. So in most cases, it's not recommended, but technically it's possible, and it does allow you to hit max damage shots. And finally, we have reaction peaks, which is really not much of a peak at all. It's just when you open wide because the opponent won't be able to react. That can be because they shot already, they aren't looking, just for some reason they aren't able to shoot you back. When this happens, you just want the wall to be fully open so that it's easy to hit for as much damage as possible. So these are the 5 categories of peaks. All peaks fall into at least one of these categories, but some fall into multiple. Like a bottom right wall edit is often used as both a bottom side and right side peak at the same time. But this doesn't just apply to wall edits. All build edits work in the same way, you just have to know how to recognize them. Like when you jump up into an edited floor with a ramp on top. This is a reaction peak. You're the one closer to the peak, so it can't be a top side or bottom side peak. It just works if your opponent isn't ready to shoot you, but if they know it's coming, they can headshot you when you do it. There are plenty more examples, but again, I want to reiterate that all of these peaks are just examples of standard situations that'll come up. In real matches, there will be way more unique opportunities that present themselves. So it's important to deeply understand the concepts and not just these examples. That way, regardless of if you're fighting on the wings of a Greek god, or in zero gravity, or next season that has drone force fields or something, you'll still be able to make effective peaks. This video was all about the movement and mechanics of each type of peak, but my last one was the in-depth on why each peak works and how to choose which ones to use and when. So I'll leave a link to that on screen along with the video I mentioned earlier explaining how to ADS during the pullout animation instead of having to wait until after to aim. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Farewell.